Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Would, of course, love for you to tell us in the comments where in the world you are. And always enjoy seeing the variety of people tuning in from all around the world. I'm Catherine Mattice, the founder and CEO of Stability Partners. We focus on turning around toxic cultures. And I have with me today Heather Younger. Heather is in the similar space as we are. Heather is the CEO of Employee Fanatix. She's a highly sought after international speaker. She's done 2 TEDx talks, and she's a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist, an adjunct organizational leadership professor. The list goes on and on. Thanks, Heather, for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I always say, and not the least of which is that I have 4 children who require lots of my
I have a
time.
rough time with 2. You've got
Yeah,
4. Holy
yeah,
moly.
it's a lot, but I'm here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So I love, we were talking just before we went live here, what you do at Employee Fanatix. So I'd love for you to share with everyone. You're focused on listening. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, after doing the work on engagement and culture for a long time, and specifically really diving deep into survey comments and doing listening sessions with employees, I started to realize that the number one thing that wasn't happening was people were not listening. And inside the organization, and it was all types of people. I mean, obviously, we look at leadership teams. We know that's an issue there. And then also defining what listening actually is. Like most of us think we're pretty good at it. And so thinking that through and after the research, just deciding to do a book on it to say, okay, let me give them a framework for what listening is so they can know, they can gauge whether they're doing it well. And they is everybody at work, not just leaders. And then some great scenarios and stuff on how to do it well. So, yeah.
Nice.
That's the work
Okay.
we do.
So it's so funny that I used to teach interpersonal communication as an adjunct professor. So I've been there, and it's interesting that we had a whole section on listening, and people certainly do. We all think we do it well, of course. I think. Well, I'll ask you why is it that we think we do it well, but we're not so great at it?
I think that we have kind of older views of what listening is. We think of listening kind of as we're sitting there quietly and we're taking in what someone says and we're very serious and we're very focused. And that is important, by the way. That's an element of listening. But what we don't realize is there's steps that happen both before and after that. I call it the seeking to understand phase, where we have to take time to reflect on what it is we hear. And often what happens is we listen and we act. We listen and we do. We listen and respond. And sometimes we listen and respond in our heads before we even had time to reflect on what someone's just said. And
Mm-hmm.
most often we do that. Most of us know we do that. So, but in an organizational perspective, what'll often happen is, let's say a manager or a coworker or HR or the senior leadership team hears something via survey, through a town hall, through listening sessions, and then they go trying to solve it without first figuring out, okay, how does this align with our organizational strategies? How much of this do we know to be true from this, that? Let's research what they say here. What impact would this have if we acted upon this? So it's like all kinds of things we need to do as a group by ourselves before we go act, and then we can act more strategically. And then after that, it's this idea of, okay, I know a lot of us here that are listening. We told somebody something at work, like we were expecting action, and we think there might have been action based upon what we said, but we're not sure. And that's because they never told us they did anything based upon what we told them.
Mm-hmm.
And that is called closing the loop. So
Mm-hmm.
even if you take action, if you don't close the loop with the people who gave you the feedback initially, they will be left guessing whether action was taken based upon their voices. So that is why the cycle of active listening is so important. And our way of thinking before is something of the past, or it should be.
Yeah, that makes sense. We see that a lot in our surveys too, where people just want to know what happened to the input that they gave or the opinion that they had. Where did it go? Out into the universe? Or did they talk about it and decide not to?
Poof, right?
Yeah. So how would you, what are your recommendations if you see that on the survey? If you see that people say, I feel like a lot of ideas are thrown out, but nothing ever happens to them, or we don't know if they're even considered, what's the solution? What's the action for that?
Yeah,
for
exactly.
that one item.
Here's what I would say, like when we work with organizations, we try to look at feedback in aggregate. And so we look for themes and sentiments. We're not looking for onesie, twosie. We're saying, okay, above the level here, if we're looking at above organization, what are the main 3 to 5 things this organization needs to work on? And we will discover through the comments, because that's the thing that we look the most at, why they gave certain scores they gave on their assessments. And then we go deeper with our sessions and culture team meetings and all those types of things to say, okay, what's the truth here? What's the real truth here? So we first start out by creating safe spaces to help them get to the truth and figure out if listening is an issue. Listening is already at the foundation of it, because if we're doing surveys, listening sessions, culture teams, roundtables, town halls, if we're doing all that, then we already are starting down the right road of listening because we're seeking to understand.
Mhm,
What we may not be doing is how are we handling the information once we get it?
mhm,
What is our action strategic in nature, or is it really super reactive?
mhm,
And then are we going back in a methodical way to close the loop with our people,
mhm,
to let them know that the words that they use, the voices that they use to help our culture get better, we're actually going to do something about it. And we have done something about it, or here's the plan, or we want you to be involved in creating the plan. So I would just say, I think almost the biggest solution at work, when we think about, so many of us feel powerless there.
mhm.
If we aren't at the CEO level, we often are feeling victims to the organization, victims to the culture that's there. Then being more inclusive in whose voices can be heard through processes of change, I think is the biggest solution we can land on, for sure.
Mhm. Yep. Love that. Yep. We're I always love when I have guests who say all the same things I do. Same here. I mean, we definitely say, let's get some people together from your team, create an action plan that you can publish, among many other things that we work with organizations on. Um, I'm curious what happens when you see feedback that says things like, we need more diversity here, we need more. How do, and I hear that a lot too, organizations say, hey, I don't really know how to get diverse candidates in here because, like, cart horse. So I'm curious what your thoughts are when you see that in a survey.
Well, I think there's a couple things going on. So if you kind of go back to the beginning of what I keep saying, I think is the core, it's inclusiveness as it relates to people's voices. So if you are having a problem recruiting diverse talent, why don't you then put together a group of diverse employees, if they are willing, to give you ideas on how you can recruit more people of diverse talent? What ideas do they have? You can also obviously go out in forums and look and see what those are. Here's the thing. I don't think it's always smart to go a cookie cutter approach. I
Mhm.
think it's more important to use the power of the people inside, their voices, their opinions, their experience, their background, their lived experience, all of those things to improve the culture. They're so much more intelligent than I think we give them credit for. Anybody
Mhm.
from frontline all the way up, side, any department, right? So I would say, as we're looking at, if you're saying you're having a hard time, I saw in the survey a trend that you really would like to see more diversity in our senior ranks. Well, we're going to be probably trying to promote those people from within. And I
Mhm.
think that I also saw this, that you look like you think overarchingly we have an issue with diversity and inclusion and all the other things around it. And so we think we know some steps to take, but we'd like to put together a couple listening sessions it could be with everyone, or it could be with just those with marginalized groups, and bring them into sessions to talk through what, the ideas they have, not only just on recruitment, but once we bring them in, how do we retain these folks that are from marginalized groups because they have different lived experiences than the majority. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. What do you think is the big blind spot right now in this day and age as COVID's over and we're moving into a new year? And what are you seeing these days?
I think we're going to have a big problem if we don't get our arms around the idea of being more flexible and open with what the new world of work looks like. And if we continue to want to have to be inside of walls or under a ceiling together, I think that's going to be a problem, because there's so many people who have gotten a level of comfort, a level of safety, that they're at, like I am right now, I'm at my dining room table. I have a studio in my basement. Like I've gotten so used to working either from a plane or in my house or in my studio that most people are that way. They have acclimated to it. They have gotten super comfortable with it. Now you're saying, by the way, I'm going to rip you out of that comfort place, that place of safety, to a place that most of you didn't feel very safe before.
Yeah.
So there's two things that have to happen. You got to be thinking about how hard line are you going to be with making sure people stay in the office, come in the office. And number two, what are you going to do to create safe spaces, more psychological safety, so people want to come? What are you going to do to create more magnetic cultures versus the ones that really make people want to run away?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Why would you rip them out of their comfy home in pajamas if and make them come to a place where they maybe didn't really want to be? Oh gosh. Okay, we have a great question, and thanks, Nicolette, for kicking us off, because I was just about to say, please do submit questions. So I'll put it here. I have a question. I'm a very direct person. I've been told to think more open-minded about parts of my role where I feel there is no room for that. I feel my manager does not hear my concerns. How can I approach it differently?
The first part of the question, I'm a little question. I don't. So I understand the direct person, and that you've been told to be, more open minded about the parts of your role. And then it says where I feel there is no room for that. So I don't know if that is if that then is paired with the fact that you don't feel like the person hears your concerns. So you want to be direct and open minded. So here's what I would say: that often people are only interested in hearing things that interest them. Or that is on their kind of dashboard or on their radar. Sorry about that. That was a sneeze right mid-show. And so I think that we need to be figuring out, how can I communicate to the other person in a way that speaks their language, that is a thing that they are tracking or they see as a success metric for them, the thing that drives them. So here's an example. So if you go to someone who's like super data oriented, like they love spreadsheets and they want to love just taking numbers and crunching them, and they like protocols, and you go to them with like your gut on something or how you feel about something or things like that, it's not going to go over well with that person, because you're not coming to them in their way of their behavioral style, their communication preference. So often we come to them and like if you're direct, for example, and the other person is not direct, then that's like, ouch for them. And so we have to just, often in our own shoes, we have to say, okay, how can I adjust the way I show up for the benefit of the person in front of me in the moment, instead of being like cookie cutter or very the same, no matter who's right in front of me. That's what I would say.
Yeah. I echo all of that. And we have to approach people in the way that works for them. And so we have to be adjusting our communication if we want the other person to hear us and listen to us. So yeah, I was curious too, Nicolette, you said, more open-minded about parts of my role where I feel there's no room for that. So I wasn't sure what that is. Is it the open-mindedness or being less direct? But I suspect your manager probably feels like you're not hearing her concerns either. So you maybe approach the conversation around that as well, would be some of my advice, to say, look, I feel like we keep having this conversation and we're at an impasse. What can we do to make sure we're each feeling heard? Because I would suspect she's feeling the same way. Okay. Michael says, in reference to this question, I find that getting the attention of others sometimes requires written language. Additionally, knowing your audience is helpful. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think that goes back to knowing the communication preferences of the people in front of you. I'm sure, Catherine, you do the same thing. I'm DISC certified. There's other types of like communication assessments. But once you understand more about what your communication style is, your behavioral preferences are, and then you start to kind of pick up on others, then you can say, okay, how do I meet them more closely to where they're at, instead of always having to be exactly who I am in that moment. My preference in that moment is what I mean by that.
Yeah. Nicolette says, we had a personality test and I came out as a commander personality. Sounds like you're a high D.
High D.
So Heather and I know DISC, so we'll speak in DISC language. Yeah, Nicolette, I would take a look at DISC, or even that, whatever that test was that you all took. what was your manager, and then if you can try to find ways to approach your manager in the way that is his or her way would be helpful. But I too have been accused of being direct. I get it. I get it. Okay, let's see. One person says, what are some good ways to train others on active listening?
Well, here's what I'm going to say first. I can't see who it is because it just says LinkedIn user, but
Yeah.
here's what I'm going to say first. It's important for us to practice our own active listening before we try to help others, because again, remember that our previous way of thinking about it might have been we go into listening with the desire to get something from the interaction. And I always say I'm a big girl. I am an entrepreneur, and I live in the real world where we all have to get something in order for business to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to have us think differently about active listening and think of it as service to others, as a giving them something, giving them dignity, making them feel heard and valued and understood in the moment. So if we go into it that way ourselves, number one, we can emulate the good behavior. So I think the best way to teach people is to do it, to lead by example, so they can emulate.
Mm-hmm.
But we when I do workshops, we have active listening workshops for teams. We do a lot of interactions where we pair people together, make them practice like listening with their eyes, listening with their ears, responding in kind, taking in all of the situation, not just what's said. The worst thing you can do is parrot back to someone exactly what they said to prove that you've listened,
Mm-hmm.
because that is not listening. Listening is taking in all of it. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say that's the reason why I decided to embark on the book. And I'm going to be doing Catherine will be doing another LinkedIn learning course this next year on active listening as well. And
Nice.
then these workshops. I mean, just trying to find different ways to get people to work together. I don't feel like the book alone is going to be the source. It's going to have to be interactions with one-on-one and teams, and for them to really see the value of it, really from an emotional perspective.
Yeah, I love that. Another person's asking any suggestions for being an active listener and asking questions without looking nosy.
Mm. Paulina, I'm not sure if you are leading others or if it's like a coworker. And some of those things depend on the relationship. I'd say most of it depends on relationship. So if you already were in a position where you built like a foundation of trust and a relationship where people know that you're coming from a place of care and concern and kindness, then it's easier to go at it and people not think you're nosy, because they just know it's just another way that you, Paulina, are showing that concern and kindness and care for them. So what I would say is that if you haven't done that work, you don't really want to venture into asking lots of questions to someone who doesn't trust you, because they are going to have wonder what's going on underneath the surface. So I would say build trust first, build a relationship first. You'll be in a better position to ask the right questions that comes from a place of care and concern.
I like that. That's a good point. So there may be people you can ask more questions of because of your relationship with them versus others where maybe you can see that they're fairly guarded. And so you don't ask them questions. Just like hugging. I was talking about hugging at work in my harassment prevention courses, that if you're a hugger, not everybody is. And so you just have to gauge how people are. And you could say that person kind of seems guarded and they don't really answer questions in a lot of detail. So maybe I don't ask them a ton of questions, or I need to build more rapport with them first before I start asking.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, Mike. So we've got some conversations going. So cool. I'm gonna maybe say your name wrong, Rianda. Hopefully that was right. Michael Revere. I love emailing and documentation or written guides. And let me show it. Or written guides where I'm at in my career. I'm still less than 10 years. I'm working on making my emails stick and be referenceable, but it works. Yes. Following up with email is good.
I love what both Rianda and Michael are talking about as relates to emails. I think emails work even better if you've had that conversation with the person, because then you can go back and just validate that what you thought you heard is what you heard, and what you intend to do about what you heard is clear, and then they can validate whether what you thought you heard and what they want you to do about it are exactly the right thing. Because the very worst thing we can do, there's two things we can do really badly. That is listen to someone and do nothing about it if they wanted us to act on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is to act on something that they had no intention for us to act on, or act on it the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really good, Michael and Rianda, the way you talk about us. If you can send the email that kind of says, was our conversation. Thank you so much for really being open, telling me this and that. These are the 3 things I heard that were really the most pressing. And here are the 2 things you really would want me to do about it. And here's what I intend to do. Can you do me a favor and clarify or validate? Let me know if this is in fact right. And then they'll say, yep, you were spot on. Or maybe in this area, it's a little bit this or that. So I would say that would be the best way to do it.
I'm thinking too about trust as we're talking. And earlier when you were talking about closing the loop, in my team, there's a lot of not closing the loop, but it's because we trust each other. So I could see we're also small, and we're also on Google Hangouts throughout the day. So we do something very unique where to emulate being together in an office, we just have Google open, people come and go. But then you can pop in and you can kind of ask that quick question as you might if somebody was down the hall from you. But yeah, I feel like when I ask my team to do things, I generally don't follow up because I know it's done, but that's because I trust them tremendously and they've never shown me any reason not to. So, but I could see growing if we were 50 people, that might not work.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be the one closing the loop if it was them taking the action based upon a meeting, it would be them saying, heads up, like in your Google Meet or whatever, wherever that is, like FYI, got it, FYI, did that thing, FYI. It doesn't have to be some long old drawn out thing. It just dots the I, it crosses the T. In your mind, you have no doubt. You don't need to have that doubt. It just boom. It is just the way to that is the spot where listening is complete.
Yeah. I guess we do that, and we use Monday.com for our project management. So that's the other way. Someone marked it done. It's been done.
Yes.
Nicolette's got another great question. Is there a way to rebuild trust if you work remotely? What do you think, Heather?
My entire team is global and remote. So I have a lot of trust for them. And just as long as we're closing the loop here and there, and we do that inside Trello and Slack, same like you, we use tech to do a lot of closing the loop. Just as long as we do that, I feel like once it's done over and over, the trust is already built. And so I don't think remote teams should have less trust. Now, if you feel like you are in an organization where remote made the trust get sketchy, I think that's probably worth some conversations to the people that maybe your distance is there. Maybe it's something to be thinking about to re-engage with those people so that you can start to build the bonds back if you felt like they were broken before. Maybe it's just, recommending to the manager, recommending to somebody on the team, would it be cool to have like a once a month or once every couple week type of lunch hour or something you're doing something where you're starting to build a relationship back. It's not just about work, but it's about like you as a person, them as people, and creating those bonds again. But I don't think that someone being virtual or someone being in a hybrid environment immediately means that trust isn't present or it somehow will erode. You just have to be more intentional about keeping it in place.
Yeah. I got to add something. I think when we say everyone's remote or hybrid or where they moved somewhere and they're going to stay over there and not come to the office, doesn't mean we can't ever see them in person. So I might recommend if there's some concern between a manager and an employee that the relationship's feeling rocky, perhaps one could fly and see the other to just spend some time together. And it could just be, hey, I'm going to fly in and we're going to have lunch and hang out for a few hours just to reconnect in person. And then I'm going to fly back home. I think I feel like I never hear that as a tip when we're talking about culture or building relationships virtually, that sometimes it is, it's the same reason we go and visit our parents once a year, 5 times a year, however many, like to connect. And so I don't know why I never hear that as a piece of advice, but
exactly. It's a great one. And I actually like Michael's thing too, which is that constant communication and reinforcement of support. I would have to say that that's a big one on mine. Like we're doing a lot of things all day in Slack and Trello and all these tasks, right? And it is important to be like, oh my gosh, that thing you did was so amazing. Like I try to give a lot of recognition and support to the team as they're doing things, even though we are, again, some of us are in totally different countries, but just making sure they know I do care, that you're not just doing the work for me just to get the thing done, but you're doing the work because we have a mission that's shared. We're in this together and I care for you and you did great work and I want to tell you about it, So I love that, Michael. That was great.
Yeah. Nicolette, I'm going to suggest that you reach out to Heather after, and then she maybe get a little more detail from her on your questions. It seems like you have a very specific situation that you're wanting to get some advice on. So I'm going to let you and Heather take it offline, if that's all right, Nicolette. Let's see. So we got one more question. Is it good not to provide full information details and leave the room for questions or discussion?
I'm not sure the context on that one. Are you getting that? Are you understanding that one, Catherine?
I think maybe they're saying if I just come in and tell people, here's what I need and leave, that then there's no room for questions or discussion or for them to engage in active listening. That's what I'm taking it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Versus giving part instructions to let them sort of create the project with you.
Yeah. And so if that's the case, then I agree with the latter part, which is the co-creation. I do have to say though, I speak on this, I teach on this, I write on this, and guess what? I don't do this well lots of times, mostly at home. I have 4 kids, or 6 of us here. Boy, miscommunication can happen often. I think about less than a handful, but about a handful of times in my career where I wasn't reading the signs of discontent or reading the signs of exhaustion or burnout. I read them, but I wasn't totally paying attention, let's say, and would like give more to somebody on their plate, give another project, and then just like move real quick to my next thing, and then recognize later that I should have slowed down because I was recognizing something was going on, slowed down and sit and listen with the person and see what their concerns might be and what they could handle and what they couldn't handle. So I think that we have all been there. Just because we're on this live show and I'm talking about this doesn't mean I can give so much. I can teach so much more by the ways I've failed in this as well. So I think that if you did it or someone else was doing it, I think it is important to kind of pause, slow down a little bit as you are having the things you have to get done and say, what do you think? Or like, would you like to help? Or what's going on? And I think when you do that, it does create more of a we are in this together feel.
Yeah, I agree. If you can say, here's what I need to have happen, but let's talk about how we get there, then versus here's the 5 steps you have to follow, and there's no room for any judgment on your side. I want to share a quick story that I share a lot when I'm teaching communication. So I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in communication. And my ex-boyfriend also had a bachelor's and a master's degree in communication. So we had 4 degrees in communication between the 2 of us, and we still didn't make it, right? Communication is so hard. It is so hard. And we have to give it more room for the fact that it is hard. I think we often just we go out, we communicate, we're tired, we're exhausted, we got a million things going on, like, here, do this, I need you to do that, I got goals I got to achieve. But really and truly, if you can give communication more credit for how hard it really is, and take some time to pause and think about what you need to say and how you need to say it and all of that, that's a lesson for all of us to, yes, pause. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm. It's huge, isn't it? It's huge.
Yeah. Nicolette's asking about improving communication skills in general. And you know what? Heather and I both have LinkedIn Learning courses in the LinkedIn Learning library. So I would check those out. And there's actually a ton of other communication courses in there. And it's just something that we always have to work towards improving. So Heather, thanks again for joining me today. This was a lot of fun. And thanks for all the great questions, everyone tuning in. Love it. Makes it much more fun to get to talk to you. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me too.
Bye.